Hi, I'm Marcelo Calbucci. This is the Service Design Show, episode 225.
Wouldn't it be great if there was a tool that could help you thoroughly analyze an opportunity before you go down a rabbit hole only to find that it's a dead end? In this episode, we are exploring PRFAQ, a surprisingly effective framework that helps you decide if that spark of an idea is really worth pursuing. So if you're tired of chasing shiny objects that go nowhere, maybe it's time to try a different approach. Are you ready to explore it? Hi, if you're new here, welcome to the Service Design Show, where we invite the brightest minds in our field and explore what's truly needed to design great services that resonate with people, push businesses forward, and honor our planet. Our guest today is Marcelo Calbucci. He brings a wealth of experience from his time at Microsoft and Amazon. At Amazon, he learned about their PRFAQ framework, a tool they'd been using internally for over 20 years. It didn't take him long to see the power of this framework and its potential impact far beyond Amazon's walls. So he took on the challenge of writing and publishing a book about it. This led him down a journey where he explored the effects that writing has on our brains and bodies. And his interest in the deeper effects of writing might not come as a surprise when you know that he's also written over 1,000 articles and blog posts in the last years. So let's get into the details of the PRFAQ framework and see how it can help us in service design. In today's conversation, we are going to explore why this framework invented by Amazon is so effective, how it can help you analyze opportunities in a systematic way, when is the right time to use the PRFAQ in your design process, how to avoid common pitfalls when using the framework, and practical tips on how to get started with PRFAQ. Now, we don't just talk about the PRFAQ framework in this episode, we actually use it. Marcelo walks me through how I could apply it to a real challenge I'm facing in my own community. You get to see the framework in action, and we instantly feel where the tensions and opportunities lie. I have no doubt that this framework will be a valuable addition to your toolkit, whether you're a seasoned service design professional or just starting out. This episode offers actionable insights for improving your strategic thinking. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. It was a lot of fun to go over the framework live, and I think you'll enjoy it as well. Make sure you also stay tuned for my closing thoughts after the conversation. I'm your host, Marc, and you are listening to the Service Design Show. Welcome to the show, Marcelo.
Thank you for having me, Marc.
I'm excited. We are going to dive into a framework that you are very excited about, and it has a lot of, I think, potential for the service design space. It's potentially very user-centric, but at the same time, it's different from what I've seen in the service design space. And you've recently wrote a book about it. So if there's an expert about the framework, it's you. And it's called PRFAQ. Now, let's start with the name. PRFAQ. What are we talking about?
Yeah, PRFAQ stands for Press Release and Frequently Asked Questions. And it was a framework invented by Amazon 20 years ago that I learned when I joined Amazon, and I thought it was great. So I decided to write a book so more people would know about it and use it.
Can you take us back on the journey? So apparently you had a role at Amazon. They were, I don't know if they were already calling it a framework or PRFAQ. Like, take us on a journey. How did you learn about this framework? When did it become a framework? And give us some context.
Yeah, the journey is really my life professional history, right? So I have 25 years of experience in technology, working on some big companies, but also I spent 18 years founding startups, working startup studios. And when I joined Amazon 3 years ago and I was exposed to this framework, the first thing that came to my mind after the shock, because the framework is a little bit weird, the first thing that came to my mind is like, wow, founders, product leaders, innovators everywhere could really benefit from this. Why is this not more popular? Mm-hmm. So I spent some time trying to understand why haven't more people adopted the framework. So, the lack of a book, the lack of information, the lack of how to do it. So I decided after I left Amazon to write the book to help spread and evangelize this framework.
Without getting into too much detail right now, we probably will later, but can you give us like a brief overview of how does this framework work and maybe what is the problem that it tries to solve?
Yeah, so the one sentence description of what this framework is a framework and a method for you to discover, debate, and decide on a strategy and a vision. And that can be a strategy and a vision for a product, a business, a service, a program, a policy, a process, anything really that people are trying to create or change. And, it has some elements to it that are very specific, quite prescriptive in how it does certain things, and some space that is completely open for people to really do what fits their need.
That makes my spider sense go off, as in, if it's applicable to so many things, okay, let's dive deeper into how does it actually work? What do you do? Because it's amazing that you have a framework for defining and aligning and debating on a vision and a strategy. But how? Like, there are many frameworks that promise at least to do something like this, right?
Yeah, I think, if you're familiar with like the business model canvas or lean UX canvas, or like these are frameworks that exist out there to do some of the work that the PRFAQ does. I think the biggest difference between the PRFAQ and these other frameworks, by the way, they're not competing. You can use both. Is that the PRFAQ is a narrative. Like you're going to write text, you're going to write a story, right? And it's a story about a vision. And a story about the feasibility, the viability, the value of what you're trying to do, right? How is this good for the customer? How is this good for the business? And you're writing like full English sentences, not bullet points, not diagrams, not, slides, not even wireframes or mocks, none of that. Like you really have to write something. And what I say is that people use the PRFAQ before they decide to start a project. Right, so the PRFAQ is the tool that you use to say, like, should we do this or should we not do this?
So we can use it alongside things like a business model canvas. And you mentioned it's a narrative, it's a story. But when I imagine a press release and when I think about frequently asked questions, the word narrative isn't the first thing that comes to my mind. So please help us explain, where does the narrative come in?
Yeah, so it's not a narrative on the sense that you're writing like a short story. It's not, by the way, a PRFAQ is 6 pages. And you're not writing like a short story that like tells about a customer that goes from here to there and does that other thing. There is a structure to this narrative. But the component that makes this a story is that you're always focusing on the customer and the opportunity that you're trying to pursue, right? And you write these things in a very particular way that's called precise writing that combine data and storytelling, right? So you're going to tell the problem of a customer, but then you need to quantify it. So this combo makes the PRFAQ very good for decision making because it's not just marketing language. Let's make the best, possible service for customers. You see a lot of that in some business documents. And it's not just the Excel aspect of it. Here is why this business is going to be successful, because people don't get attached to numbers only. And on the story side, people don't trust it, right? Like they need to see a little bit more than just a story. So the PRFAQ try to combine both of them in a narrative form. So you're writing full sentences in paragraphs about why this makes sense.
You've seen a dozen of examples of PRFAQs. How does it actually combine these two elements? What do we see? You mentioned full sentences, paragraphs. Again, when I envision a press release, I envision a text document, but like what's the aspect where you see this combination of qualitative and maybe quantitative data coming together?
Yeah, so let's talk about the structure of a PRFAQ. Yeah. So you have the first page is the press release, the second page is the customer FAQs, and the next 4 pages are the internal FAQs. And the way you write a PRFAQ is from the bottom to the top. So you start from the internal FAQs, then you write your customer FAQs, then you write the press release last. But the way people read it is from top to bottom. And the internal FAQs are questions that answer about the customer, the problem, the market, the opportunity, the solution, the model, like how we're going to make this work, what are the resources that we need. So I'll give one example of a question that appear on an internal FAQ, right? Which I always recommend is the first question, like what problem are we trying to solve, right? Like you need to start from that question. And there are 2 classes of questions that I call either facts or opinions, assumptions, and hypotheses. Like the problem that a customer has is a fact. Like you should not be giving opinions about it. You should go out there and really understand and state that as a fact. Here's what's going on right now. This customers can't do this job, or they can do the job, but they have to go all through these hoops. And you have numbers and stories that combine answer that question, that once someone reads, they go like, oh, I get it, right? I know what we're talking about. I know what this problem is. Now let's move on to the next questions that we need to understand. So you're putting everyone on the same page about the problem, the customer, the solution, the go-to-market, and all elements.
And I want to get back in a second to those 6 pages, but now I'm thinking about, okay, where and when does the sort of solution phase come in? So from a service design perspective, understanding the business challenge and the business goal and understanding the user needs, the pains, like that's our bread and butter. That's what we do day and night. That can take weeks, months, years to fully understand that. And we sort of pride ourselves in saying that asking the right question is 90% of the work, and trying to find the answers, that then stuff becomes easy. Is the PRFAQ a method to use once you have all the data, or is it also a way to help you maybe narrow your research? Like when does it come into play?
Yeah, it's actually both. So what the PRFAQ is not is an ideation framework, right? You still need to bring your own way to discover a solution. What the PRFAQ helps you understand is, because you have to answer questions in a certain format, it helps you identify gaps on your understanding. So it's going to help you say like, oh, wait a second, we really don't know how customers are finding the solution that they use today. So we should go out there and do some research about this, if it is important, right? Like sometimes some elements are not as important for an innovation. But on the solution space, like you're going to have to answer questions about the solution, like how is this solving the problem that the customer has? And like you're going to have to write it down. And in the process of writing, Marc, what happens is you start to realize I have some gaps on my knowledge, right? I probably should take a step back and like work with my team, or like do some thinking or whiteboarding or like brainstorming, design thinking, whatever you're going to do to figure that out. Once you figure that out, you come back and like you finish answering clearly and succinctly that FAQ.
So then I'm still trying to imagine. It helps me to see the gaps of knowledge that we have. And then like, what's the decision that still needs to be made? So like, again, when does the PRFAQ really shine? Where do you see its power come to fruition?
Yeah, so the idea here is, imagine you had a spark for an idea, right? Like you're like, oh, maybe this product should exist, or maybe this service should exist. Or you identify a problem. Like someone tells you like, this is a problem for me. Like you go like, that's interesting. Maybe I can solve that. Or the third way is you identify a customer category, right? For whatever reason, like you're interested in the customer category, and it's like, I want to understand what problems this group of people have. So either you have a solution, you have a problem, or you have a customer. You need all three, right? So the way I say is like, you start from a spark. There's something that triggers you to like, I'm going to start investigating this. This is when you start writing your PRFAQ, right? It's super early on the process. It might be like, if you're part of an organization, it could be a VP that goes to you and says like, hey, should we build this? Like the minute a VP says that, open a document, start a PRFAQ, right? It's there early in the process. And then as you go answering those questions, which should take a week or two, more or less, depending on the size and the scope of the project. By the way, we're staying on the realm of strategy and vision. We don't go into execution, right? We're not doing wireframes and planning. Like, we're discovering the core of the strategy, what is important or not here. And then you write that, and you collaborate with other people to provide you with information to review. So you present the document to other people, not as a finished document, but as a way to get them to collaborate with you. So what I say sometimes is like, a PRFAQ is almost like, the architectural models that they use to discuss if the building should be this way or that way, and like, where are we going to move furniture, whatever that is. The PRFAQ is like that. It's not the real project, but it is something that you put on the table so people can like have a understanding of like, oh, we are talking about this. This is the strategy, this is the problem, this is the customer. So once you do that, and you have enough people reviewing, providing feedback, like the people that are going to be executing, the stakeholders, the people that are going to be impacted, the leadership, depending on the type of business, it might be engineers and designers and product managers and marketing and sales, like whomever needs to be involved on that project, they collaborate. And then you have a decision point that you go like, okay, we have enough here that we feel like this is an opportunity that we should pursue, or we should not pursue because we couldn't fill some of those gaps, or we identified that the problem wasn't as big as we thought it was.
Cool. Yeah. Starting to see the value. And what I'm getting from this, and correct me if I'm wrong, the value is largely in that it helps you to analyze opportunity in a very systematic way through a set of predefined questions that help you. If you're able to fill them in, you'll have more confidence in making a decision or not, right? The set of questions and going through them systematically, that's where the magic happens. Is that correct?
No, it is correct. It's a system. And I like to think of PRFAQ not only just a framework or a matter, it's a whole system of things that combine, deliver a lot of clarity and help people think critically. So in preparation to write the book, I read a lot about the science of writing and reading, right? So there is enough research out there that talks about when you're writing, it triggers different part of your brain that helps with critical thinking. Not only critical thinking, it helps with recall and remembering things and making associations and coherent stories. So one thing that is really hard for us humans to do is to write a paragraph of text that is not coherent. It's physically hard for us. Like if you write sentences and combine them and they are not logically connected, you don't feel comfortable with that. You're not going to share that. You don't like even reading that. So the narrative that is used in the PRFAQ forces you to say like, I need to make this coherent. So that's why you take a step back when you write. It's like, this is not making sense. You wouldn't do that if you're creating a PowerPoint slide, for example, because PowerPoint slides is too easy to not be coherent. You just put a few bullet points there and like, that sounds about right.
How does it force you to be coherent? I get that the writing a paragraph in that format, it's hard to be not coherent. But like, how does a PRFAQ do that in other ways?
Yeah, I'll give an example that I've seen happening many times. One of the questions that you're going to include on your PRFAQ is like, what's the proposed solution, right? For the problem. And when people start writing that proposed solution, they are forced to think about, is this solution actually solving the problem that I stated just a paragraph above, right? And you're going to say like, you're a smart person, you have been on the industry for a while, like, you're like, no, that doesn't happen. Well, it does happen. Often, people propose solutions in PowerPoint or on pitch decks that actually do not address the core of the problem that they just stated. They state a problem, they state a market, they state a horrible situation that's happening here, and they have a solution, and people go like, but wait a second, this would not address that, right? Like you're talking about an orthogonal problem here. So when you're writing, that is less likely to happen because your brain activates certain parts that say like, this is not right. And you feel uncomfortable. And it forces you to think differently about this problem.
Okay. We're going to go a little bit deeper into this rabbit hole because you're speaking in front of an audience who values visual way of thinking and working a lot. This is where we feel comfortable. Yes. There is a saying, a picture says 1,000 words, a prototype says 1,000 pictures, by the way, but you're advocating for, let's write. Let's go into writing. I'm curious, what is your, especially if this is in innovation-related context where a lot of the things are still messy, up in the air, unknown. Putting things into words is hard, and maybe like you want that fluidity. So how do you see this? This need for strict words versus the fluidity of maybe visualizing things and connecting things on a whiteboard. How do you see that?
Yeah, I get the question often, good. Marc. And I had like good debates with lots of product leaders out there and design leaders that say like, this doesn't make any sense. Like we need something tangible to look at, to critique. And I think there was two elements to this, right? The first one is a big one, which is the minute you put any wireframe, any mock, any design in front of someone, they're going to critique what they see. And they're not going to think about what is not there, right? So the PRFAQ avoids having any kind of visual branding, tables, diagrams, flows, so that people don't jump into that immediately. They spend some time on answering like bigger questions about the purpose, why we are doing it, what is the real problem. Do customers actually have this problem? Is this problem going away or is it increasing? Right? So you spend a little bit of time talking about that. It does not say like you can't do the other stuff in parallel, right? And often what you will do is you do UX research, both discovery research, generative research, and other types of UX work to help you better understand, what's out there, how customers are feeling about it. But the PRFAQ, when you're debating, it should be really about like, why are we doing this? And what is the impact for the customer and for the business if we do this, right? So you focus on that conversation first and you leave all the extra stuff outside of the PRFAQ. Not that those conversations can happen, but it's a tool to avoid people critiquing the logo and the branding and the color and the position of the buttons and everything.
Our community, fortunately, doesn't go a lot into UX and UI design. Sometimes they do. I hope not a lot. And I get what you're saying, that people might critique the color of the button. They might critique, I don't know, the shape of your prototype. But I can imagine that we can say exactly the same for a sentence or a paragraph. The people will be nitpicking about, oh no, we shouldn't use customer, we should use patient. So like we can do a lot of nitpicking and getting lost in the weeds around words.
Yeah.
Like how is that different?
Yeah. So what you're really including on the PRFAQ are strategic decisions, right? So strategic decisions might be, do we want to have a physical store or just an online store, right? That is a strategic decision. Like you're not going to discuss like where is going to be this, physical store. Maybe, actually, let me take that back. It might be strategic, right? Like depending on the type of business, it might be strategic, but it might not. So you have to ask yourself, is this a strategic question or just like once we decide to go ahead, it's a tactical question? If it is tactical, don't include it.
The same could be said for conversations around prototypes or mock-ups or whatever. Like if somebody starts to tear your button apart, you could say, is this a strategic conversation? No, it's not. We're talking about the bigger service or the model that we are having here. what do you like? Who struggles the most with these PR FAQs, and who have you seen gets the most value out of this? And I'm thinking about maybe not specifically roles, but personality types, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, no one has ever asked me that question. I think the people that benefit the most from this format are really people that are not in the weeds of what the team understand and what the team is doing. So that might include executives, might include stakeholders, might include your peers that really are not as familiar as you are with, whatever service or business or project you're executing on, because it doesn't include those level of details that would make confusing for them, right? So for example, in a technical project, people tend to talk about the cloud and the provider and the framework and the tools they're gonna use, and it becomes really hard for someone in marketing to critique if they start seeing lots of words that they don't understand. Because the PRFAQ doesn't include that, it becomes easier for someone in marketing to say oh, I can work with this, or no, I can't work with this. Here is a feedback, right? And whomever is leading the project, who's owning the PRFAQ, incorporates that feedback from marketing, from sales, from engineering, from an implementation team, whatever, right? To make it clearer for everyone, why we're doing this and what we're doing.
You had the opportunity to write a book about this, and apparently, I'm going to guess that you spoke to a lot of people, got feedback. What have you seen is the biggest misconception about this framework?
Well, I didn't get a lot of that because a lot of people didn't know about this framework, right? So the framework was invented by Amazon, and the people at Amazon are super familiar with it, right? The people outside of Amazon, very few people are familiar with it. And sometimes when I ran into someone hey, do you know the PRFAQ? Have you used? A few people did, but they didn't have enough there to really understand how to use correctly, right? But what I've seen happening within Amazon, where we use PRFAQ, and by the way, don't think of Amazon as a single company. We think of Amazon as this massive organization. It's not like that. It's 1,000 little companies, right? Fighting each other for resources, doing their own thing, using their own technology, taking their own approach. So each team at Amazon uses their own set of PRFAQs to make their own decisions, right? And what I've seen happening sometimes is PRFAQ being misused as a plan, right? So include too much of the tactical information and the dates and the roadmap and the features and, the list of everyone who's going to be working on that. Once you get to that level, you're already kind of committed, right? And the purpose of discussing strategy and vision is so you can agree if this is valuable or not, right? By the time you're already committed, it's a different instrument that you should be using.
We mentioned already the difference between people who are more comfortable with maybe ambiguity and visualizing things versus people who are more comfortable critical thinking, with writing. Now, if I look at my writing, how it has evolved the last 2 years with the rise of AI, I would say it has had a significant impact in the fact that nowadays I still do the strategic thinking. I need to come up with why does this matter? Which direction should we go into? But then I write a few bullet points and ask ChatGPT or Gemini to do all the wordsmithing for you. How do you see the influence of large language models on the framework?
I believe you're doing the right thing, which is we should be doing the strategic thinking, and then the tactical implementation of that strategic thinking, you can leverage AI to do that. And I think there is three ways that you can use AI, right? So the first one is use AI to research, to learn things, to think out loud, to bounce ideas, that kind of stuff. You can use AI to do the work for you, do it for me, create a strategy for this new service, which I do not recommend. And the last one that I see very few people using is using AI to critique your work. And I love that one. I don't know if you ever pasted a paragraph or a text into AI and said, like, critique this for me. As simple as that. And AI sometimes is so good at finding, logic flaws or statements that are not clear, or saying like, hey, use this abbreviation here and that abbreviation there. Does this mean the same thing? So it's a fantastic partner in that case. It's almost like an editor, like reading your text and like, I don't get it. What you're trying. What is your message here?
It's less painful to get embarrassed in front of AI versus your CEO, right?
Yes. And because it's a broad thing as well, often AI can provide, very valuable insights. Broad, I mean, the AI has a broad base of knowledge, can provide insights about what you write. Sometimes it doesn't have enough context to say like, oh, I don't think this is going to work because it's so specific to your need. But often it can provide lots of things saying like, hey, in education, this is not true. Like, why are you stating that?
No, I definitely see like AI being a great partner in this process. If you're struggling, like if you're struggling with actually writing, then and with the critical thinking, this can be a great partner and sort of maybe alleviate a little bit of the pressure. It's the same like people who say that they cannot draw, right? Everybody knows how to draw. We all are able to make a square, a circle, a triangle. But there are also people out there who say, I cannot write, especially when you say a narrative that might be a little bit scary and a story. AI can be a great help here.
It can, but be careful here, because what happens with AI is AI often or nearly all the time writes coherent text. And then when we read coherent text, we assume it's true. And when you're talking about strategy, particularly strategy for something new, you have to be careful because AI is doing the average of everything that exists already. So if you're trying to innovate, truly innovate, like creating something new that doesn't exist in the world, I think AI is going to give you an answer. But that answer very likely is not correct in terms of strategy and thinking critically.
I'm not sure if you should ask AI for answers, but you can ask it like, if I give you these are the 5 core elements of the answer to question X, can you help me formulate a paragraph? And then it's quite easy, I think, easier to be the curator, whether or not the thing that AI spits out makes sense. But yeah.
Yeah, that works. And I do that for articles that I write sometimes. Like I ask AI to write an article. I hate it, but it gives me some inspiration to like, oh, I get it. Like on the first paragraph, I'm going to write like this. The second paragraph, I'm going to write like that. Rarely, almost never, I can reuse what the AI wrote because I say like, this is not me. This is not my language. This is not how I would think about it. But I got some good inspiration from what it did.
I'm really curious. How would somebody actually start using the PRFAQ? And maybe we can try to use me as a case study or as an example. I run a business. I offer a service. Can we try to use that? How would you guide me on using the PRFAQ in my situation? Like, what would be, like, let's try to go through a few steps maybe.
Yeah, no, actually, let me give the example of the book.
Even better.
Because I wrote a PRFAQ for my own book, right? So if you think about the book is a product that I'm putting out there, right? And there's a customer for the product, which are the people who are going to buy and read my book. So I wrote a PRFAQ describing like, what problem am I trying to solve with this book? Why this book should exist in the world, right? Who is the customer? How are they solving this problem today? Like, what do I need to learn about them? How are they discovering solutions for this? So I wrote a PRFAQ that helped me think through like what I should include in the book. And by the way, when I started my book, I was like, I'm going to focus on startup founders. I'm going to write a book for startup founders and how to use the PRFAQ. As I start writing my PRFAQ, I realize there isn't enough startup founders out there. So if you write a book for a very small audience, you're going to have a very small adoption of your product. So I was like, you know what? I should rethink about this book and think about like product leaders and innovators everywhere, right? That's a better way to approach this problem. So as I was writing, like it brought me that clarity of like, who should I write for? So we could do the same thing for you, Marc. For example, let's say you want to start a new community.
I have Marcel, I have a specific example maybe that I'm actually working on, and again, we haven't rehearsed this, so it might fail utterly, but let's
try it.
Let's try it. So within my community, I'm trying to start a new service, which is basically that allows people to bring in a friend to a specific event. So it's a bring your friend to a premiere kind of thing. That's a service that I'm trying to offer.
Tell me. Yeah, tell me more about this.
Okay, so if you're a member of my community, I trust that you know which other people would be an interesting guest for the company. For me, it's interesting to expand the network with people I don't know. And for the people who would be invited into our community as a guest, it's a risk-free way of experiencing what our community is about. So that is like the thing that we're trying to put together.
Yeah. So, all right, let's try this live. I think you need to ask yourself really, what opportunity are you trying to pursue? Right? I think the invite a friend thing is a tactical thing that you're doing for a bigger strategic thing.
Yeah, I can tell you what the biggest.
So what is that bigger strategic thing? Do you want to grow your community?
I want to grow the community with more high quality members, with more of the right people, and bring in more diverse voices. That is like, and the strategic goal behind that is that it's sustainability of the community. The community is more sustainable when there are more diverse voices and there's a certain number of participants.
Yeah, so I like that more because that's more strategic, right? Like you're really talking about diverse voices to help make the community stronger, lasting longer. So I would start from that perspective and ask like, that is the problem that you're trying to solve, basically. If you reverse that, you're saying like, we don't want a community that collapses.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Which is very common.
Super common.
With lots of communities, particularly if they get the wrong kind of people. I build communities as well. And like, if you have too much of the people that are not aligned with the people that you already have, it dilutes the value.
100%.
Right? For example, you bring too many sponsors or too many people trying to sell to your community. Like, so you start from that problem statement.
Yes.
Right? And then you ask like, is this a growing problem? Like you have to understand the severity and importance of this problem.
Okay.
Right. For your business.
How would we express that?
Yeah. So, if you ask people on your community and they say like, yeah, that's not a big deal, then you wouldn't think the severity is very high. Right. But if you survey your community and they start saying like, yeah, I've been in other communities and this is a problem, like I would leave the community if that happens. So that would require you doing some qualitative or quantitative research about it.
Well, and that's a very good point. We survey our members twice a year, quite intensely. We interview our members, and the question that we aren't asking yet is, in this case specifically related to this, one of the risks that I'm potentially seeing is that it becomes an echo chamber of people who know Marc instead of bringing in more voices of people who I don't know. So one of the questions could be, do you feel that to which extent do you feel that the community is currently an echo chamber, and do you see a risk for the future? Something like that.
It could be that. I'm not sure that's a strategic problem per se.
Okay, what would be the strategic problem here?
Is the sustainability, really.
Okay.
Right? Like your concern, if you ask like, why are you concerned about this? The answer is sustainability. Right. So using the 5 whys sometimes is a great way to get like, what is the root of the problem that you're trying to address?
Okay. I'm curious in that case, won't sustainability or profitability or growth or customer retention eventually always be at the center of the PRFAQ because that's what all organizations are after?
Yes and no. It depends on your PRFAQ. Sometimes your PRFAQ is very specific to a small set of problems. Sometimes it's bigger. It's like the business, right? What you're talking here for me is like more of your business. Like this is really big for you. And it's really hard to know when to stop asking why, right? This is the trick here. And you're probably familiar with that as well. But like, I always feel like why? To make more money. You went too far, right?
Yeah.
That's not useful anymore because you can derive strategy from that.
Yeah. So, okay, that would be an exercise in itself, like at which, what is still a strategic level. Maybe the strategy, and again, we're thinking out loud here, but the strategy here is also that I believe that my existing members are the best ambassadors and the best people to bring in new members. That's a strategic decision, right? So my acquisition channel, I really rely on my existing members. That's a strategic decision.
Yes, that is. But you need to state that in the form of a problem. Like, what problem are you trying to address? So do you believe right now you're not leveraging, and I hate the word leveraging, you're not leveraging your existing community to bring new members?
Yeah, I would say that currently as the fact.
So you state that, but you need to also, if you were writing a real PRFAQ, you need to quantify a little bit. Like, that's a great opinion that you have, but right now it's an opinion.
Okay, so we would say on a yearly basis, only 10% of our new members has come through a referral of an existing member. And we want to get that to 50, 60%, right? That's
perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Awesome.
Yes, that's the right level of answer. You might include some other information about retention as well. Like, are the members that stick around more likely come from a friend or more likely come individually? You're going to find like useful data there. And as you unpack that information that you have, you start to have these aha moments about like, oh, this is the problem that I really have, right? And is it growing? Is it not growing? Do I really understand how the customers are thinking about this, right? How they would articulate the problem back to you.
Okay, so let's say that we have sort of aligned on the why. What would be the next step that you'd suggest me to take?
Once you include enough data about the facts, right? What exists today? What is the problem today? How are customers addressing that problem today? How are they inviting people today? Like, there's probably already an informal mechanism that things are happening on your community. And you're trying to productize it, like how can we scale? So once you collect this first phase, which I call the facts, it's the time for you to pause and you write it, right? And then you pause and you go through some ideation process, right? So then you can use whatever mechanism you're familiar with to think like, let's brainstorm ways to solve this and think through, what's going to wow people, how we can increase the numbers. And you can even do some market testing and validation if you think that's important, right? In some cases, you might need a feasibility study, to know it's possible actually to build that or to solve it that way.
Yeah, interesting. So, for instance, for me, I do a yearly review cycle on how the business is going, what have we achieved. Like, this would be a very good moment to like, if you're setting strategic goals, ambitious for the next years, for the next 3 to 5 years, to have a PRFAQ for those strategic goals. Correct? Like, is that a good...
Yes, but let me just correct a small thing here.
Sure.
One of the problems with strategic goals is that people sometimes think too big.
Okay.
And it becomes really hard for you to grasp it and make it concrete. So I think you should have a vision, like a long-term vision for whatever you're doing. But when you talk about strategy, you should really try to think about 12 to 18 months max. Because that's something tangible that you can grasp and say like, yes, this is what we're going to do, as an organization for the next 12 to 18 months. And this is not planning, by the way. This is really strategy.
So I like this example because I feel that saying a strategy for the next 12 to 18 months will be to, or we're thinking that focusing on increasing the number of referrals is a good strategy. Filling in the PRFAQ is going to be a sense check for us whether or not the problem is big enough, the opportunity is big enough. And then we do not go into the tactics. We do not talk about how we are going to act on the strategy yet, correct?
Yes. Or better, it depends. You might be doing some of that, discovery of the solution and how we're going to do this to inform strategy. right? Because a lot of times is not only should we do this, but also can we do this, right? Like, do we have the resources? Do we have the team, the capacity, like the other elements that it's required for you to make it happen, right? You can't just dream things and say like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. You need to know if you can do it, right? So it's both the can and the should together that go in the PRFAQ.
And this refers to a comment you made earlier where you said you need a spark. And in this case, maybe the spark was solution driven. Hey, Marc, let's invite new guests to a season premiere. But the PRFAQ would help you to, okay, let's take a step back and think about more of this. What is the strategy that this is actually advocating? And is that the direction that we want to go into? Right? So the solution could be the spark, but the PRFAQ would help me to step back and think about, like, does this really align with where I want the business to go?
Yeah, and you often broaden the solution, right? Or you shift the solution a little bit to the right or to the left. So like taking those steps back to really understand the problem and the customer and their needs helps you think about these other things.
I wanted to pivot into a different set of questions, but is there anything else that I would need to do? I'm sure there are a lot of different things that I would need to do, but like, okay, what's next for me now that I'm on this PRFAQ journey?
Yeah, so I think one important thing for us to talk about, Marc, is that you have lots of ideas and business have lots of ideas. So it's rarely that you're evaluating a PRFAQ by itself. You're evaluating one PRFAQ against many other PRFAQs, right? So you need to decide which opportunities you want to pursue, which opportunities you think are not worth pursuing. Like maybe, you know, for your business, you're thinking like, I want to do this. I want to bring more people to my communities. I want to launch a new podcast. I'm going to launch a new consulting. I'm going to launch a workshop. Like you can't do it all, right? So you use the PRFAQ as a mechanism to understand and get clarity on like which, if you can do 3 things in a year and you have 6 ideas, which 3 should you do, right? And how do you select across them? So it brings you clarity on like the impact that this is going to have for your business and for your customer.
You mentioned that this process takes 1 to 2 weeks. Is that really the case? Because I can imagine sometimes you can, like if you're in the weeds of it, you can do it probably in an afternoon, and sometimes you'll need 2 months to actually figure this out.
And so you have to balance the effort that you're going to put in a PRFAQ with how much confidence you need to have in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right? So if you already have a lot of evidence and a lot of data, like, and you write your PRFAQ and you feel like, I feel good about this. Like, I don't need to go out and research anything. Like you said, it's going to be a day or 2 for you to get to that level. Of course, if you're in a team, you still need to involve the team. So there's going to be some meetings and like coordination that you're going to have to do to collaborate on the PRFAQ. However, if you're doing something that it could be the life or death of a business, you probably want to spend quite a bit of time on it, right? Maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever you need. So you don't throw, the business out the window. So you have to balance like impact and conviction.
Yeah. No, for sure. Again, we notice in service design, as in how big of a gamble are you asking the business to take? How much of a guess is it? And if the stakes are higher, you'll probably want more confidence, more evidence to base your decisions on. And this is one of the reasons we advocate for doing fast, quick, and cheap prototypes, because then it's okay to fail and to fail fast, and that's encouraged. But one thing I'm curious about as well is, as with a lot of these models and frameworks, you fill them in, it helps you to think through the problem, and then it ends up in a drawer or a mirror board that nobody sees. Like, does it matter? Do you still need to look at it? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I say that the PRFAQ has 3 superpowers. Superpower number 1 is to help you think critically. Superpower number 2 is to help you articulate the idea better. And superpower number 3 is to inspire people that are working with you. So number 2 and number 3 are long lasting, right? Your ability to articulate a solution well, even if you don't use a PRFAQ anymore, even if you move to a slide style presentation, you're going to be able to tell the story so much better without rehearsing. Like it's going to be in you. And this is what I talk about. Writing helps with your brain, not only thinking critically, but recall information so much better. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be a better storyteller in front of stakeholders, executives, customers, whatever, because you wrote the story.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And the inspiration aspect really kicks in when other people on your team read the PRFAQ and they go like, oh, I get it, what we're doing. I get our customer. I get the problem that they have. I get the solution. I don't know exactly how we're going to do it, but I get it. No one goes out and is like, huh? What does this mean?
It's, I still have to get used to the idea that a press release and an FAQ can be inspirational. It's not the first word that I would associate with a PR FAQ.
I know, but I read quite a few PR FAQs, and like sometimes you read a PR FAQ and go like, this is so cool. We should build this. This is going to be so impactful, right? And you're like, it's like reading a news article about a breakthrough in science, right? You always feel like this is amazing, but you didn't see the breakthrough in science. You didn't see the lab or the molecule or whatever people figured out, but you read it and you feel inspired by it. So the PRFAQ is similar to that in a more structured, business-oriented way.
Yeah, and again, I can imagine that that's like, you won't get there maybe in one shot. Like writing, there is a reason why we have New York Times bestsellers and the rest of us are just writing a blog. It's hard to write things that actually inspire people and touch them on an emotional basis, not just the facts and figures. So I guess it takes some practice and maybe some writing lessons and some help from AI to actually convey that emotion, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be contrarian here.
Good.
I think it's easier than people think.
So
it's much easier.
Yeah. Right? Why do you think people like me think that it's hard?
Because when you think about writing, you think about beautiful novels or like beautiful, stories, short stories that you read. They're like, I can't do that. And I'm not asking you to do that. That's not the goal, right? This is business or organization writing. Sometimes I prefer the word organization because PRFAQs work for nonprofit, government, or any type of organization, right? But the way you're writing, you're really speaking about problems and solutions. And people are really good at feeling inspired by that, right? In the sense that, like, once you tell the story of a problem that exists, you quantify it, people go like, yeah, this is real. I can understand that. And then you have a solution that people are like, oh yeah, this would address that. This is exciting. Like, people feel the urge to fix problems. You know, like it's in our DNA, I guess. So you're not trying to write beautiful sentences. You're actually writing quite simple sentences. But when you string them together, the story comes alive without any fancy words or elaborate writing or not a Pulitzer Prize or, type of writing.
Yeah, and this is, again, bringing this back to the world of visual thinking. The art, quote unquote, of sketching on the back of the napkin. Like, the reason people think they cannot draw is that they are misinformed and think that drawing is about aesthetics, which it to a certain extent is, but that's not the case if you're trying to convey an idea. You can convey a very powerful idea, again, using a Venn diagram, and anyone can make a Venn diagram. And I think that's also what you're trying to advocate here. It's not about the aesthetics of your text. It's really the simpler, the better, as long as the core key message gets across.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Thank you. I'm glad. I'm glad that made sense. So, Marcelo, we are heading towards the end of our conversation. I'm curious, if you could write a sequel to the book, what would be in it?
What I learned is, I was writing a book about a framework where you write. And I was studying writing a lot, right? In the context of like business writing. And I read maybe a half a dozen books about writing or more. And several of them were like business writing books. And I don't think they are good books out there. So I do think that we need a good book on teaching people how to write email, how to write Slack message, how to write business documents. Like, sometimes you have this email threads that go back and forth, like for 20, 30 emails. That's poor writing. Like, because people are not very, very clear and communicating, the problem that they have and how they think about it. So I think there was a need for something like that out there. Now, AI is going to change everything, right? Like, AI is going to be embedded everywhere, and AI is going to be able to provide us feedback and say like, hey, you're not very clear on your message. So I'm not sure we're going to need a book for that, but it's an area that I'm very fascinated.
Written communication. I think you would have a challenging time convincing people at the moment that that's a skill they need to develop. But I'm looking forward to your next production. Marcelo, we tend to end the show with a question that you feel would be good for us to think about when we're walking the dog, cleaning the kitchen, or taking a shower. What's a question that you'd like us to think about?
Yeah, if you're a professional and you work on a product, service, business, the question is, do I understand my customer problem enough? I think that's the most important thing to be successful in anything that you do, is like to really have a deep understanding of your customer and their problems.
Amen to that. And I would like to add a question to that. Think about what is enough, because that's also the challenging question. What is enough? So Marcelo, if people want to learn more about you and the PRFAQ framework, where should they go to?
Yeah, I created a book website. So if you go to Google and search for PRFAQ book, you're going to find the book website there. And there's a ton of resources, templates, examples. I actually recommend people start downloading the examples so they can read a few of them to get an understanding for what it is. And then buy the book.
Awesome. Cool. We'll make sure all the links are in the show notes. Thanks again for coming on, for taking a gamble and walking me through live some of the questions of the PRFAQ. I think it's super interesting framework and good to have in our toolbox of all the other methods that we have as well to be more diverse. So thanks again, Marcelo.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, that was an insightful conversation with Marcelo. What struck me the most is the magic that lies in the structured approach and the set of questions. It's not about writing a novel, but about using the framework to think critically and identify key gaps. This approach is very user-centric and design-driven, which aligns perfectly with what we aim for in service design. So, a big thank you to Marcelo for sharing his expertise and introducing us to the PRFAQ framework. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, you can do me one big favor. Click the like button on this video and leave a short comment if you haven't done so already. Not to feed the algorithm, but to let me know whether or not you're enjoying conversations like this. And finally, before we part ways, please take a moment to reflect and celebrate that by joining us today, you have directed your attention towards learning and growing as a professional. So from everyone who you are going to impact through your work, thank you for taking the time and making the commitment. My name is Marc Fontein, and I look forward to having you with us again for a new conversation on the Service Design Show. Take care and see you soon.